turning back to mitigation, our regional mitigation strategy is appropriately looking at reducing greenhouse gases. Now, we face an interesting challenge in our region. This is what I call our portfolio of pollutants. And in the Bay Area, we do not have a very diversified portfolio. You see that the biggest single chunk of greenhouse gas emissions in the Bay Area is coming from the transportation sector. So that's where we're putting our focus on reducing greenhouse gases. But clearly, most of those emissions are coming out, by the way, out of the tailpipes of automobiles and light trucks. It's not airplanes or heavy trains or ships or anything like that. It's out of the cars we drive. So we are going to have to continue to work to develop new fuels that pollute less. We have to look for new vehicles that use less fuel. But we've decided to focus on where and how our region is growing, because this is the best way to reduce our collective carbon footprint. In the Bay Area, we have a lot of development that looks like this, where everybody needs a car to get from one place to the other. So we're working with our regional partners on a program called Focus. It is encouraging more higher density mixed use communities where residents can get around by walking, by bicycling, by transit instead of having to drive everywhere. As we thought about the vexing question of our sea level rise strategy and adaptation, when we looked at it, we found that there were three basic approaches we could take. The first option was to ignore the problem for now. We could wait for the National Academy of Sciences to issue its report, hope that their projections are more definitive. However, it's unlikely that future projections will be any clearer than the ones that we've seen so far. All of them are based on assumptions. All of them show a range of possibilities. All have a degree of uncertainty, and each one that comes out seems to show higher water than the last one. The other reason for not waiting is that we're already seeing the impacts of sea level rise in San Francisco Bay. This is a little pier right next to the ferry building in San Francisco, and it has had to be condemned because it was so significantly damaged. Now, it's old, but the damage didn't result entirely from age and simple deterioration. Higher and more frequent waves were pounding at the underside of the pier and lifting it up. So we have evidence that sea level rise isn't just some problem that we'll have to deal with a century from now. In fact, we won't have to wait long to see the evidence of sea level rise. This map shows in the blue the current 100-year floodplain around the bay. That is, as Matt said, 1% chance of flooding every year. Overlaid is the 16-inch sea level rise that we're expecting by 2050. And you see the maps pretty much coincide with each other. So that means that 41 years from now, mid-century, what had been the 1-year floodplain could be, or the 100-year floodplain could be the 1-year floodplain. The second option we looked at was, as Matt suggested, we could retreat from the water's edge, prohibit all new development in low-lying areas. In other words, just don't make the problem worse by allowing new development that may have to be protected from flooding in the future. However, we found there's a problem can arise if you paint with too broad a brush. Some of these low-lying undeveloped sites are large enough so they can be planned in a way that can accommodate sea level rise. And some of them are small and in the midst of areas and sites that will probably be protected. And it may be possible to develop some of these in a way that can be integrated into a regional shoreline protection strategy. Also, prohibiting all development in low-lying areas within the inner core of the metropolitan Bay Area would conflict with a regional strategy for reducing greenhouse gases, which is to concentrate more development within the mild microclimate of the Bay Area near transit, so we can reduce automobile driving that is the largest source of our greenhouse gases. In other words, we want more development in the already urbanized core, not less. We want more growth near transit and ferries, not less. And we want more housing in the mild microclimate of the Bay Area instead of inland areas where it is hotter in the summer and colder in the winter. So in the end, we decided on a triage approach. We'll have to decide which areas must be protected, however high the cost. Where are the areas where we should retreat from the waterfront and focus on natural resource enhancement, and which areas deserve special attention. And just as in an emergency room, making these decisions will not be easy. New Orleans has been described as the impossible city at the inevitable location. Much of that same description can be applied to San Francisco, Silicon Valley, and our international airports. Some areas are simply too important to lose, so we'll try to find ways of protecting those, whatever the cost. That means we're going to have to build levees. We're going to build a lot of levees. And we face a double challenge in building levees in our region. They have to be big enough and strong enough to hold back rising seas and floods. And they have to be able to do it during an earthquake. In some places, we can retreat from the shoreline and focus on restoring tidal wetlands, because tidal wetlands are about as close to magic as you can get when you're dealing with sea level rise. All wetlands are helpful in floods. They absorb water, they absorb wind energy. The wider the wetland at the front, the lower the levee can be at the back. And tidal wetlands do something else. They actually take carbon out of the atmosphere and they put it in the ground. They sequester carbon. So tidal wetland restoration can be part of both a sea level rise adaptation strategy and a greenhouse gas mitigation strategy. That's why we need to take a hard look at areas along the shoreline where it may be more cost effective to remove existing development and replace it with wetlands than to protect low value structures. We also need to take a second look at low-lying areas that are planned for development, because unless they have sea level rise incorporated into their planning, it may be best to simply abandon those plans and to allow the development to go forward and then face the cost of trying to protect it, no matter what the cost. In order for our regional strategy for sea level rise to be effective, it has to be bold and audacious. We need to stop thinking about protecting the bay the way it is now. And we need to abandon the folly that we can ever restore it to the way it was in the past. Instead, we need to design the bay for the way it'll be in the future, when it'll have different water elevations, different salinity levels, different temperature, different chemistry, in fact, different species. And that's why we need to deal with resiliency and sustainability. The problem is, we don't know what resiliency and sustainability look like. The two things we learned from Hurricane Katrina are, first, that don't build below sea level. The second is, we're going to figure out how to build in areas that may someday be below sea level. What we hope is that planning to accommodate sea level rise will be much like planning to deal with seismic activity. When we learned we lived in a region that was riddled with earthquake faults, we didn't move away. We turned to the architects, the engineers, the scientists, the planners, and said, how do we build buildings that won't fall down in earthquakes? We know that the bay waters will continue to rise. We just don't know how fast or how far the water will come up. So we need to, again, turn to the architects, the engineers, the scientists, the planners, and say, how do we build around a bay that will surely get bigger? Madness has been described as doing the same thing over and over, but expecting a different outcome. And clearly, we can't solve the problem of sea level rise by continuing to do what we've been doing in the past. And that's why this is the best advice we've ever found for dealing with a problem. From Albert Einstein, who said that the world we've created today as a result of our thinking thus far is problems that cannot be solved by thinking the way we thought when we created. That's why I'm so happy to be here with you